I think the first thing, we had a really interesting discussion about growth, and there's certainly a view that places like Oxford are full and shouldn't grow any further. But I think the majority view here was that growth is, first of all, inevitable, but also it's something that should happen and needs to be accommodated. And if it's not accommodated, all sorts of bad things happen in terms of house prices, in terms of exclusion, in terms of inequity within the city. And so we need to find a way of accommodating the growth that will happen in places like Oxford. And I think the second set of conclusions was about the fact that the planning system is woefully ill-equipped to plan for that growth properly. We don't have a way of deciding where a place like Oxford should grow, where it's the sustainable form of growth, and because essentially the local authorities are fragmented, we have a system which needs to be coordinated much more effectively than we are. And we heard from Grenoble earlier and saw a story of a city which is also constrained, but by the Alps rather than by policy boundaries, but nevertheless has managed to find a way of growing within its boundaries and expanding and creating new accommodation.
In 10 years' time, I don't expect the housing crisis to be solved in Oxford, or for Oxford to be very different to how it is. The current plans there are for doing anything Oxford are absolutely minimal. They involve 500 houses here, a small development of a shopping centre there. It's very, very little. I expect Oxford to be more clogged by cars. I expect Oxford to contain even more angry private renters. I expect to hear more people moaning about the fact that they can't make a life here than I already do, and I already hear a hell of a lot of that.
Our problems aren't unique. We had people from York who've just left. I don't know what I did. We had Nottingham represented and Grenoble represented in the group I sat in on. Our problems are the same problems everybody's facing. They might have slightly different twists to them because they're somewhere local, but we're not alone. And talking to people who've either been through this slightly before or perhaps just going through it now is, again, an enormously useful thing to do.
Latest understanding of Oxford's housing need is that we need around 28,000 new homes for the city up to 2036. We can find within the city boundary about 10,000 homes. So we're looking to the councils around us to provide 15,000 homes to help Oxford's unmet need over that same period. There are 4 councils and they're looking to divide the provision of the 15,000 between them. If I had a magic wand and could get from the government what I need to help the council implement its housing strategy, I think it would be the forward funding and the ability for us to deliver the transport strategy to underpin a sustainable growth sort of pattern for the city.
I think it's always useful to take where you are and then take yourself outside yourself into another place and look at the same set of problems from their perspective. And so it was really useful to have the people here from Grenoble who were similar sort of size to Oxford, twinned with Oxford in terms of cities, and to see how they cope with things.
The development of the city and the urban development as constrained by the mountain. Free mountain, Chartreuse, Beldon, Vercors. And at the beginning the city was in the middle of the valley, and it was very compact. But after the Second War, they are arriving in Grenoble that everywhere, arriving the same thing. The sprawl continue growing development in the valley, and the constraints of the mountain are not very efficient. But now it's impossible to continue this way, and we must find the new solution for sustainability cities with a new model. This new model is to link this green belt like the mountain with the metropole, with the concentration with services, universities, administration, with the nature in the mountain. The challenge is to have a new link, a new vision, to be together.
The case for growth's sake. I mean, I think there's a real problem that we have a perception about the moment we're having growth for growth's sake. We do need to talk about that and say whether that's really the case. My view is it isn't. I think it's a bit like plate spinning. You've got to keep spinning them in order to get the benefits of the plate spinning on the stick. And if you want those all to fall down, then that's fine. But we need to keep moving forward. The minute we stagnate, we won't move forward. but there's equally a very strong and reasonable argument about trying to push some of the growth into other parts of this country that don't have those values at the moment, those successes, and that we need to think about a way of sharing those. And the responsibility sits with people like Bob and I to talk to government and articulate that and try and encourage them to have a slightly more regional view.
Well, over the next 30 years, Oxfordshire needs to build another 100,000 homes, and Oxford City needs to accommodate 40 to 50,000 homes. It can't do that within its own bounds, and so it needs to find a way of expanding, and at some point we need a mechanism to allow that to happen. And it happen in a way which builds an Oxford tram, because Oxford got rid of its trams. We've heard about the congestion and gridlock that happens here. It needs to be able to use that development pressure to build a tram to make the city work, which it's currently straining at the seams. It's currently on the verge of not working, and that is not good for Oxford, it's not good for the university, it's not good for the people who live here, so we need to find a way of dealing with that.
I think there's a very kind of poignant moment now, and you have to credit people like the TCPA, the Town and Country Planning Association, for thinking about this for a number of years. It's pretty much in the DNA of that organisation, but they have been very effective at sort of lobbying for new garden cities, garden towns, revisiting things like the New Town Act, which would give power to develop sort of new towns again. So yeah, I think we're seeing much more public sector and private sector attention around sort of garden communities, if you like. And I think we also understand better how it's important that the health of a place, health of citizens is linked to the place that they're in. Was it Churchill who said, we shape our buildings and then they shape us? And I think you could say that about cities as well. So I think, yes, there's a lot of interest now, and probably that does mean that there's a sort of moment to not necessarily rebrand, but reconceptualise and rethink about the garden city.
If you were trying to avert the growing housing crisis in Oxford, making it a sadder place, you would have to bring in plans which were quite progressive, which went forward 10, 20 and 30 years, and which said that you were going to change things in a way which was quite dramatic around the city. It would have an effect on people initially not thinking that some of their homes were worth quite as much as they thought they were worth, because their value is based on the fact that they're scarce. And if you knew that there's going to be expansion on the edge of the city, it's going to be green expansion for cycling in, then your house wouldn't have that premium value. But you'd also actually have to start to build some of these houses and apartments here. And when you begin to do that, things change. There's much more that needs to be done, but can only be done at the national level. You need to take control of landlords. At the moment, it is landlords who are buying houses in Oxford. It is landlords who are deciding to put up the rents as much as they can. It's got nothing to do with their costs. They just put up the rent the highest they can possibly get away with, and only a national government can stop them doing that. As soon as there's any sign of a national government who may control landlords, and within 10 years I'd be hopeful that we do finally get one, then of course that takes the heat out of the housing market, because who would buy a really shoddy house for £400,000 to rent out if they thought they weren't going to be allowed to rip people off in future on the rent?
We've got two things about growth and development in historic cities. One is the maintenance of our historic centre, which is the place in the city which in fact has become iconic in world tourism, which has more grade 1 listed buildings anywhere in the world per square foot, and which I think by common consent has been pretty well maintained by the university, by our local plan for many years. But then you have got around that historic centre, which is the sort of iconic bit of Oxford, a lot of city which, although it's part of Oxford, is not actually very historic.
We are fortunate to have a joint venture with Oxford City Council to create a new neighbourhood called Barton Park, 800 homes on the northeast edge of the city. It's been an award-winning 50-50 partnership with the City Council. A council that wanted to respond with great urgency to the city's need for affordable housing. They had a clear vision for a garden suburb for the 21st century that would provide homes for people. Grosvenor acts as master developer, so we've promoted the proposal through planning, we've delivered the infrastructure, and then together with the council, we're selling the plots to house builders so that they can deliver the homes. And as joint venture partners, we share the risks and the rewards. And we drew two reflections from the partnership that echoed some of the things we saw in Freiburg. First, that the public sector's leadership was the pivot point, the necessary starting point for success. Oxford City Council's been determined to achieve its vision. It worked hard to find the right partner and to have a model that would deliver this new neighbourhood.
So we've got to think about future-proofing our developments, and the Barton development, which we're building out at Barton Park at the moment with the Grosvenor estate, we've sought to build in as much of that as we possibly can, subject to cost, and it's always a cost issue. But carbon reduction, so you get effectively houses which may not be as carbon efficient as you would potentially be able to achieve, but they're pretty good. You get green spaces, and very importantly, as the colleague said from the group about connectivity and green spaces, about water, using water as a theme, because it's a very important part of creating an urban landscape.
I mean, it was a very good discussion, and you can imagine we had people here from the sort of voluntary groups in Oxford who were very much opposed to growth and very keen to protect the green belt. We had the various council leaders here, we had academics here, and yet there was a debate which was all very constructive, and actually was all agreeing that Oxford needs to find a way forward, which I think doesn't exist in the wider sort of policy debate which goes on.
We got a positive discussion about what could be done, informed by some really wonderful presentations, not just of Grenoble and drawing on Freiburg, but also about things that are happening in this country, for example, in Cambridge. And I think that led to a very civilized conversation or discussion between a wide range of people who didn't necessarily know each other or come from similar backgrounds about what could be done, which yielded, I think, some very practical proposals about ways of moving things forward.